Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Grow Up Level Up, the podcast where we talk about the fun and games that helped us grow up and the fun and games that we choose to partake in today as adults, or in this case, young adults, in our day-to-day lives. So today's episode is kind of a part two, like a sequel to another guest that we had that is of very similar profile, but um, of course, everyone's different. Everyone has their own story. So that's why today we're bringing in Jaden, aka Vectis. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Samson. Nice to meet you. It's great. Thanks for letting me on the show. Hi, my name's Jaden. I go by Vectis Online. I currently work with SFU Esports as their VP Facilities, as well as UBCEA Esports as their Overwatch Director.
Wow, very, very fancy title. Director and was it VP?
Yes, VP.
Wow. Okay, and we'll dive into what that means in a little bit. Before we do that, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, I got to shout out everyone. Make sure you are following us on all our socials at Grow Up Level Up on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Make sure you are connected on those channels as I make announcements, as well as our Discord, link in the description below. Make sure to also check out our other shows. I do two other shows actually on this channel. One is called You Grow Up Level Up, or You Gulu. We just finished our season 1 of that show where we talk a little bit about life skills that adults of all ages can partake in, stuff like time management, your morning routine, nighttime routine, how to do small talk at networking events and stuff like that. We just wrapped up our first season, so it would be awesome if you can check that out and let me know what you think. And also check out Cheers Love, which is actually kind of related to our topic coming up. Cheers Love is an Overwatch League fan retrospective podcast where I brought in fans to talk about what their favorite part of the Overwatch League was. That's actually kind of how we connected initially, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that real quick. And one big announcement is that we're going to be wrapping up Grow Up Level Up for the end of the year of our Lord 2023. In a couple episodes, we're going to take a little break for the holidays. I have a big vacation coming up, so so that's why we're going to take a break. But don't worry, there's still 1 or 2 more episodes after this that you can enjoy before we call it for the holidays. Without further ado, Vectis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the very warm welcome. You guys have a great recording room here. It's looking great here.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we are recording at Launch Academy, my workplace. Launch Academy is Vancouver's best tech accelerator. We work with startups here in Vancouver and all over the world. So if you run a startup in tech, we would love to work with you. Check us out at launchacademy.ca. But yes, we are recording in the media room here for those listening online and not watching on YouTube. But I have to ask all our guests, what are you drinking today on the podcast?
So today I have a brown sugar bubble tea, pretty much, milk tea.
Ooh, yeah, that looks really good. For those listening, it is a bubble tea or boba from Cha Yuan.
Yes, that's correct. Just down the street from right
here. Yeah. I think I heard of that place. It's pretty good. And yeah, very beautiful. Is it? Well, you're gonna have to give us a taste test to tell us if it actually tastes good. Nice.
Yeah, I'll give it a quick test.
How's it out of 10?
That's pretty good.
Okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll grab one on the way out. That's awesome. And for me, what I'm drinking, I think it's a turmeric tea. Grabbed the tea bag out of the kitchen earlier, and I'm not sick or anything, but it is later in the day. I don't want to be drinking too much caffeine, ironically.
100%. No worries. I got the day off tomorrow, so I'm not too worried about it.
You're right, because all night tonight, gotta be gaming. So I gotta ask this question I asked every guest. What are your top 3 games of all time?
My top 3 games of all time. In terms of video games, I actually really like Metroid games in general.
Ooh.
It's those sorts of roguelikes, or like not really roguelike, kind of like collector style exploratory games I actually really enjoy. They're some of the only solo single player games I enjoy, I think. So definitely some of my favorite games, yeah.
Metroid, which one specifically? Metroid Prime or the 2D ones? Or?
I've only played the 2D ones so far. I've heard people say Prime is really good. I have to get into that soon.
Okay.
But if I had to pick one, maybe Fusion. I know people don't like Fusion that much, but it's the one I got started with, so It's definitely one of my favorites.
That's a good one. I remember playing that as a kid, and that was like, whoa! I didn't know games can be so like intense and scary. Even though it was like 2D, it
Yeah.
was on like a Game Boy, right? Game Boy Advance or something. But hey, it's like things are different back then. And yeah, cool,
Yeah.
cool. So Metroid Fusion. What about the other couple?
The other two, I mean, I think I have to give a place to Overwatch just because I really love the game. It's had
Mm.
a large impact, I think, on how I work in esports now.
Mm.
Just as a club, someone who's leading a club, someone who's working with clubs all the time.
Okay.
So that's definitely taking one of the places. And then recently I've been playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh again, actually.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
I actually do like playing like traditional card games.
Yeah.
And so Yu-Gi-Oh is definitely a game that I had a lot of fun with in the past, and I'm starting to get back into it now, both online and in person. So it's definitely
That's
up
awesome.
there.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh. Well, first of all, Overwatch. I agree. One of the greatest games of all time. That is shunned with a little like tough pass, right?
Yeah.
I think we both know. But yeah, I think it's super different. There's no other game really like it, and yeah, it has a big impact that I'm sure you'll share in a bit on your life. And then Yu-Gi-Oh, in person, on and online.
Yes.
What draws you to Yu-Gi-Oh? Because
Uh,
that's a really popular
yeah.
game, but yeah, not too many people
I don't
play it.
know. It's like kind of a strategically deep game, I think, but
Mhm.
not like overly deep. It's also just something
Okay.
I think I started a long time ago, and because I learned it and then quit and then came back, I think that's a big reason why I kind of value it a lot, just because I can see where it's been and where it is now and be like, okay, uh, I really enjoyed the experience so far,
Hmm.
just even coming back to it. So I don't know. It's like a really community building game, if anything, I think.
Oh,
It's the type of
community.
game like you play with your friends, right?
Okay.
So definitely something that reminds me of that.
So you're not entering tournaments for like money for this.
Oh, certainly not.
No,
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 I'm not that good.
you're just playing like the kitchen table, I think is
Yeah,
what they
playing
call it.
kitchen table, playing with my friends, that
Yeah,
sort of thing.
that's awesome. Cool. What's your favorite card in Yu-Gi-Oh? Did you?
What's my favorite
I
card in
know, loaded question as
Yu-Gi-Oh?
well.
Ooh. Maybe not favorite card. Maybe if I had to pick like an archetype, I do like heroes, and that's kind of a cliched
Mm.
answer.
Hmm.
Everyone likes heroes, but yeah. Funnily enough, I share a name with the English dub's main character for that season of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay.
It's just a very weird coincidence.
Oh,
So I do like heroes, yeah.
it was just meant to be. Yeah.
Maybe.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh. I also really like card games. I've like Magic, Marvel Snap. I want to try that One Piece card game. Pokemon, of course. But Yu-Gi-Oh. I definitely played when I was younger, and I don't know how to play anymore.
No worries. It's definitely a complicated game.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe one day I'll try it again. Card games are expensive though. That's also one
That's
reason
for
why.
sure, yeah.
That's awesome. So I want to dive a little bit more about you. You mentioned that you are currently a student at SFU. So what are you
That's
studying
correct.
at SFU?
So right now I'm studying criminology. I'm going
Hmm.
for a major in criminology and a minor in psychology. So it's mostly just social sciences, just the general coverage of that field.
Hmm.
It's definitely interesting. I'm enjoying my studies so far, coming into my fourth year. Yeah,
Almost done.
almost done. Almost done. I'm looking towards doing co-op very soon, maybe next semester, maybe next year. We'll see. But it's definitely coming up.
Awesome. Okay. Well, for those who are listening outside of Vancouver, the criminology SFU cliche is very true and alive.
Yeah, for sure.
No, that's awesome. I also have a background in psych, so
Cool.
really interesting that you're also taking part of that. Um, where are you thinking of taking that co-op? And well, I guess after your degree, where are you thinking of working?
Definitely looking towards some federal agencies possibly. I'm
Nice. Okay.
actually taking some forensics and cybercrime courses right now, so I'm looking definitely into those specialties, seeing if I like them,
Hmm.
seeing if I like the practical ends of those jobs, or if I'm more suited towards something more general, just like administrative work.
Hmm.
So likely I'll end up working for some sort of federal agency, whether that's, CBSA, so that's the Border Security Agency,
Hmm.
or, just somewhere like policing. Uh, am I going to be a police officer? I don't think so. I'm not cut out for that, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, the office work, it's definitely something I'm okay with.
Cool. Oh, okay. Wow. Ooh, seems like you got a pretty like clear path. You have a direction that you wanna go for, eh?
Yeah,
That's
it's maybe not clear path, but we're getting there.
things change. Things change. We all know that. No, that's awesome. So you just talked a lot about working in like federal jobs and
Yes.
policing. But the reason why you're here is actually to talk about your role in esports
That's
in
correct.
Vancouver in Canada. So, what is the brief history with you working with not just
Yeah.
SFU Esports Association, but also UBC's University of British Columbia's Esports
Yes.
Association? How'd you get involved into both?
So how that worked was at first I started with SFU Esports just pretty much right when I joined SFU as a student in general in my first semester, right?
Hmm.
Back then it was still during the pandemic, and so obviously
Mm.
esports was something I enjoyed at the time. I watched a lot of the Overwatch League, and I played video games. So that was one of the things I was like, hey, maybe if there's stuff doing online, this is one of the better clubs I could contribute to, right? This is one of those things you don't have to show up in person for all the time, and be
Hmm.
worried about, wearing a mask and that sort of thing. So I thought that was a good place to start. And so it's taken me here now, 4 years later.
Hmm.
I've gone through a couple different positions, mostly Overwatch related, now working facilities with SFU Esports. And, around the same time of facilities being established at SFU Esports, I thought, UBC Esports is a good place to also continue developing what I was working on previously with Overwatch, with
Hmm.
the larger community, just with how that's working in the West Coast in general. I thought, hey, this is a good platform. This is a good place to be able to share with people what I've learned, and
Mm.
just help develop on that end.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you just saw it as a natural progression, to not only enhance your own skills, but to also like expand the possibility of this org and its reach and I can't think of the right word off the top of my head, but like its influence, I guess,
Yeah,
and its positive influence. So at your that first of all, that's awesome. That's so cool that you have this
thank you.
drive and motivation to do for this community. What's your day to day like in these roles? Maybe we
So
can start with
yeah.
SFU since you go there. Yeah.
So right now, my day to day at SFU Esports is it's not like super demanding or anything. Right now, I'm doing VP facilities. So what that means is I actually manage our physical space right now, which
Mm.
opened in the summer. We have a room in the Student Union building at Simon Fraser University, and that room is called the Gamers Lounge. It's funded by the Student Society. Essentially, they've
Wait.
purchased PCs essentially and consoles. So it's
What?
my job to essentially in the summer it was my job to prepare the lounge to open for the fall. So we did like a limited release,
Mhm.
limited launch, tested the things out, and it was good. So now we're launching in the fall. Uh,
Sorry. So this
sorry,
is the first time they opened like a gamer lounge at SFU.
that's correct.
What? That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Future's so cool. When I went to school, they didn't have stuff like that.
yeah. Our room is kind of tucked away in the student union building, so on the like people will sometimes walk in and be like, "Where did I go?" Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just like a room with 16 PCs and like a couple
Ah.
monitors, large monitors for the consoles.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting space. Uh,
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of work was put into it by myself as well as the other VPs, the previous presidents as well. Of course, they worked for a long time with SFSS to help them figure out, obviously the PC situation, the room situation, that
Hmm.
sort of thing. But now we're in a pretty comfortable spot where the room is open. People are free to come and go, and use
Nice.
the lounge whenever we have volunteers, essentially.
Nice. It's like a drop-in kind of space. People can
Yes.
play games with each other, like a free PC bang,
Yeah, pretty
PC bang.
much. That
Yeah.
is kind of the purpose of it. It's, just a place for people to have fun, in between
Yeah.
their classes, if you've finished a stressful exam, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just, talk to friends, meet new friends, right? And just have that space on campus to relax.
That's awesome, man. SFU making moves, man. That's amazing. I cut you off a little earlier,
Oh, no worries.
but first, yeah, that's awesome that you guys set that up at SFU. That is like one meeting a need for a community that often gets overlooked. I think people like there's gamers like us that are like at the forefront doing these kinds of in-camera stuff, but
Yeah.
there's also a lot of gamers that go to gaming as like um, I don't know if coping is the right word, but
Yeah.
they see it as a way to detach, and some folks fall into a deep spiral. So
Yeah.
having that opportunity there, but it's also in person around other people. That's super important. I feel, anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely been a good influence on SFU esports as a whole. I
Mm.
think just having that space, it benefits our competitive teams, right? People can
Mm.
come, they can meet, they can have socials, right? They can practice together in person, which I think is a really big thing. It's important to know your teammates as people, obviously.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like just only being online, it's a different level than being able to meet people in person.
Yeah, totally. Like for a lot of esports, it's played online, so your teammates are really just this icon and a name. You don't get to build this in-person soft skills kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you've learned in in your studies in psych, right? That's awesome. So you go to SFU, but
Yes.
you're also a trader and go to
That's
UBC.
correct. Yeah.
How did that happen?
So how that happened was it was just a simple transition, right? I had a friend who was working at UBC Esports at the time, and he
Mhm.
was like, "Hey, do you want to come work with me on Overwatch?" So
Oh.
I talked to him. We'd worked on Overwatch stuff in the past before. So yeah, I ended up working with him on Overwatch as an Overwatch director with him for a time.
Mhm.
Now it's just me working in the Overwatch director position, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting experience because I
Mhm.
think overall UBC Esports has been, let's say, the more major player in the West Coast for collegiate esports,
Yeah.
just in terms of, let's say, player population, just in general, UBC Esports is a bigger entity.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's definitely a good opportunity to work there, I think. Definitely a good opportunity for me to help develop the community.
Mhm.
One of my big concerns with SFU Esports is that there's nothing you can do to make up for the fact that if there's no people, there's no people, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a smaller
so, yeah.
population at SFU. Yeah.
So one of the things I really wanted to do, one of the major things I still want to do at UBC Esports right now is develop kind of a mentorship program, at least for what I do in Overwatch,
Mhm.
because I was able to start a team at SFU. All that stuff was going, but that there was obviously a point where it was like, okay, I don't think we can push this any further, right? Uh, no matter how hard you work, there are things you can't overcome.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so something like an environment change can help with that. Something like UBC, I saw, people were working hard there. People were very interested in Overwatch and developing the scene in a way that I wanted to help them with.
Mhm.
And so I said, hey, why not? If, both sides are okay with it, I don't
Yeah.
see a problem here, right?
The UBC people aren't going to kick you out for being part of another school.
No, no, no.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So a couple things there. Like you mentioned that UBC has been around for a long time, which it has.
Yes.
I think that in the collegiate scene, even in the wider Canadian esports scene, like UBC Esports Association
Yeah,
is recognized as one of the major players. They've been around forever. If you want to learn more, actually, you can watch Renzo's episode
absolutely.
that we had a couple weeks ago. Um, so yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up there, and it's really awesome that they let you be a part of both. Like, there's no
Yeah.
tribalism. They can see it's for the betterment of the community and for the sport and for the organization. So that's awesome that they gave you that opportunity.
Yeah, I really appreciated that they were open-minded about it and gave me a chance there, to work with them.
Mhm.
I really like working with them so far. It's been a great experience. Everyone's been nice, everything's been going well, and so I hope that continues.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your day to day like as Overwatch 2 director then?
My day-to-day as Overwatch 2 director, the thing is, the Overwatch department it's a very interesting balance
Okay.
because right now I'm mostly focused on managing the competitive team because we're getting that back up and running, which we started in the summer. It's kind of in full swing now in fall with the team going straight into leagues and that sort of thing and maintaining that. Finding a manager can be difficult for these competitive teams, and so a lot of the times I end up doing it, which I don't mind at all.
Yeah,
I'm used to it,
it's
right?
a good experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think a lot of the last couple months, my day to day has been, working with the team, finding people like coaches, managers, support staff, recruiting players, like building that necessary infrastructure for them to continue working as a team and trying to enable those players, right?
Cool. Cool. Okay, yeah. So it is the manager part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just the competing part and finding are you responsible for like finding players and coaches, or that's more like if people want to do it they will speak up and it's your job to pick and choose the best.
So one thing I've definitely found is that it definitely helps to be outspoken about what is available, right, to students in general. I think a lot of students go about their day to day lives and they're like, okay, well, I have this interest, but they're like, well, I can just do it on my own, right? It's like
Mm.
there's a lot of people you'll find that just like are good at the things they do. Let's say video games, for example, like in this example, where
Mhm.
they could join a team or they could not, right? But a lot of people, some you would think wouldn't be into esports are actually into esports.
Mhm.
So just that reaching out sometimes and be like, hey, if you started playing esports, obviously I don't just go up to everybody and be like, hey, esports, but
You
like
see someone sitting at a computer and you're like tapping on the
I've
shoulder. Hey, you
yeah,
want to
no,
join a team?
I've definitely met people in courses and stuff even
Yeah.
who were just like normal friends. We've spent like 3 months studying a language, let's say, and I'll be like, hey, I heard you play a lot of CS:GO. You want to join the Valorant team? And they'll be like, sure, why not?
Oh,
And then
nice.
they've had long careers at SFU. They're working hard. That sort of thing. It's definitely interesting to see the intersection of kind of the breaking down of what you think of like what a lot of people say is like this demographic of whether you're a gamer or not.
Okay.
I think that's definitely a thing that's changing right now.
Oh, okay. So you're almost like a little scout,
Sometimes.
you're a little like a scout, scout finding people. But I'd like to know more what you said about the intersection of types of gamers or stereotypes
Yeah.
of gamers. What did you mean by that?
So this is something I really noticed definitely starting with the lounge, right?
Okay.
I think
At,
because, being in a space that's physical is really different from being online.
totally.
Uh I think especially with the release of Valorant and I think also in Overwatch in the past as well, games are becoming more and more like not easier but open, if that makes sense. I
Hmm.
think it's becoming more of like a cultural trend for people
Mainstream.
to yeah, it's more mainstream for people
Okay.
to play video games, right? It's more accepted, I think, in the general culture. And so that's definitely changing how I felt about gaming before, I think, as well as how the expectations of people going into gaming. In the past you'd be like, oh, if they're really into gaming, they'll reach out. But I think in our current time right now, it's actually the other way around. It's like a lot of people play games, but it's become kind of normalized to a degree where it's like it's not really worth mentioning. You just talk about yourself, right? When you meet someone, you talk about yourself, you talk about what you like.
Yeah.
But one of those things that people don't talk about a lot is gaming.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
think
Okay.
I think a lot of people do it. Most people do it, but most people also don't talk about it because it's just kind of an accepted pastime.
It's like that. That's really interesting. To bring that up because one thought I had for a really long time is like, um, everybody watches movies, but you don't
Yeah.
call yourself a movieer. Everybody reads books. You don't call yourself a reader. But when you play games, you call yourself a gamer.
Yeah.
And now what you're saying is like, games have become so normalized that it's not really like anything special. It's not something you brag about, but not because it's something to be
Yeah.
ashamed of. It's more so something that like, oh, doesn't everybody do this? It's like mentioning you read, right? Or
Yeah,
something.
it's like
Yeah.
that. I think
Okay.
I think one comparison I have is like at least to my own life, it's like I have a lot of friends I know who play badminton. Let's say they play sports, right?
Mm.
Like unless you know the other person really likes badminton, there's no reason you'd be like, "Oh, I play badminton." Right?
Yeah. No reason to bring it up.
There's no reason to bring it up, right?
Very interesting. Yeah.
So I think that's definitely an approach that I think people should start to use more, at least in terms of like community building wise.
Hmm.
It's definitely interesting to see that intersection,
It's like normalized to a point where, um, yeah, it's like you won't bring it up in day to day conversation.
Yeah.
I think so another shout out to another podcast I was on called That 30 Show with David and G, where I was a guest actually, and I got to talk about play. One thing that I talked about on there was uh, like the concept of going online on Discord at night
Yeah.
every night to play with your friends is so normal for gamers that no one brings it up as something special. But and I think the story I told was when the pandemic happened, I mentioned like this to my outside group of friends, like my classmates when I went to school.
Yeah.
They're all women. Not saying women can't be gamers or something. I'm saying like this demographic of women didn't do the Discord at night thing, and they were all like shocked and surprised, and like this is a whole new world of opportunity for them. But for gamers
Yeah.
or people who play games, it's very normal.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so that was a big tangent, but basically
Yeah.
the whole idea was you were saying like,
Just team management. And then outside of team management, I do usually events. So
oh,
UBC
okay,
Esports will usually hold maybe four major events and some minor events a year. So my responsibility is to work with my executive team to better those events. And we've definitely done a lot of events in the past where I was on the SFU side or I was just kind of a third party and I would assist with these events.
mm-hmm.
Now I'm more in the driver's seat, right? Helping
Cool.
out directly with UBC's events specifically. So it's definitely an interesting experience. I haven't been with UBC for a very long time yet, so I'm definitely working on how the internals work, but it's coming along. We have an event coming up for Winter Series,
Mm-hmm.
so hopefully
Well,
that will go well.
shout it out. What's the event coming up?
So it's just our annual UBC Esports Winter Series. We haven't announced too much about it. It's kind of an
Okay.
annual event.
Okay.
But yeah, it is a recurring event. We're hoping to host something for Overwatch this year.
Nice.
So we'll definitely keep you guys posted 100%.
Awesome. No, that's great. That's yeah, event management is also a big skill, and that's awesome that they're letting you do that for Overwatch. Oh, one of
100%.
our
Yeah.
passions. So yeah, that's awesome. So seems like you got a lot on your plate. between UBC and
Yeah.
SFU. Like, what is there any like big differences between the two, or like how do you manage your time between
Hmm.
bouncing between the two?
I think the thing with SFU Esports is it's a very, I don't want to say it's structured, but it's like a very regular system already. Like it's a very established system
Oh,
because
okay.
it's something I have like, at least with the room, I have control over, right? I can be like, okay,
That's
we've
true.
decided on this type of format, right? You know, this day, these people will come in, and then my job is just to make sure everything is running fine, right? So
Mm,
PCs are working, there's no damage. You know, the volunteers know what to do,
wow.
you know, that sort of thing. The very basics. So once that starts going, it's really just a matter of scheduling on a week by week basis. And you know, if I'm done class, like I'll go check in and I'll go
Yeah,
home, right?
that's awesome.
So it's not too much of a strain on me, honestly. Definitely on the UBC side, generally most of their departments have in-houses. So it's just pickup games where you show up with your friends and you play. Right now, they're not live. And so right now, for Overwatch at least, they're not
Mm,
live. So it's not too much strain on me right now. When the weekly events come back, maybe I'll become a bit busier. But right now, my focus is just on making sure the team is doing their job
mhm,
and you know everything's working. Uh, Outside of that, just basic event planning, looking ahead and making those connections to make sure everything can be in place when we need it.
mhm, mhm.
So on the day to day, I don't really do too much to be honest, outside of just checking in and making sure everything's okay or finding opportunities for them.
Cool, that's awesome. So it is, yeah. So that's great because you are a full time student, and that's
Yes.
definitely priority number one. So this being not too much of a strain on you, but also still giving you opportunities to run these cool orgs, get people to get together, organize like super cool events.
Yeah.
That's an awesome gig, and yeah, really happy that you have this opportunity. The big boss of SFU,
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not
SFU
the big
Lounge.
boss.
uh,
But yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on for this podcast. It's definitely a big opportunity.
No problem. Yeah, no, it's part of this podcast is to highlight like what people are doing day to day that involves gaming.
Yeah.
Well, and that's just not gaming. Like we could go into like what's your main in Overwatch, but no, I want to talk about how games integrate into our day to day
Yeah.
lives. Like you as a student, me as a full time employee. Like how do we still find time to play
Yeah.
and to find connections and these kinds of experiences? So
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So I want to talk a bit about Overwatch Canadian Leagues
Yes.
or Overwatch Canadian League.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing what that is?
So
And
yeah,
yeah.
Overwatch Canadian Leagues is essentially just an org that we created a couple years ago back in the pandemic. Me and a bunch of collegiate leaders at the time. So the goal of the league was essentially to have a Discord server or at least a community where the collegiate players and the collegiate community could come together, at least for Canadian schools.
Sorry.
No
We
worries.
do this live, and I just choked on some tea. Sorry, can you say that all again?
No
While I was
worries.
still coughing.
All right, Overwatch
I
Canadian
apologize
Leagues.
for the podcast listeners.
Sorry about that, everyone listening at home. But yeah, essentially, Overwatch Canadian Leagues was a community we created on Discord between a bunch of collegiate leaders back in the pandemic. The overall goal of it was to essentially work together to host weekly pickup games at the time, as well as other minor things, you know, just providing advice to each other. You know, let's say there's an event coming up. Okay, well, who can we get for free agents? You know, if people want to put up teams, you know, they can work together on that. It was a really big social platform, I think, at the time during the pandemic for us to really work together, get to know each other better. And it's definitely made an impact on how we interact with each other today, at least in the Canadian Overwatch community
Okay.
for the collegiate level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like it started as an online community. This was
That's
never
correct.
in person. Oh wow.
The reason for that is because Overwatch Canadian Leagues is mainly populated by like collegiate people,
Okay.
which means that it's mostly executives of other esports clubs. So we have members from like University of Calgary, University of Alberta, all over the country, right? So physical meetings aren't really possible, to be honest. It's not realistic for us as students.
Not yet.
Not yet. But online, we definitely hold those sorts of meetings. We definitely have, you know, goals. Like we'll post to each other about opportunities for tournaments.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll give each other advice on like, oh, you know, our esports club is going through this. So like, what can we do? That sort of thing. I think it's just a really good place for discussion right now. Yeah.
Awesome. How big is this organization so far?
So right now we have definitely at least 12 schools involved.
Wow.
12 schools
Okay.
esports organizations involved. That being said, it's not really that big of a server right now.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in kind of a rebuilding phase since we closed the server down for a short amount of time, for about a year or so. And right now, we're looking more towards a competitive perspective.
Cool.
Because previously in the pandemic, it was more of a how can we, play together, right? How can we talk? How can we get to know each other? Right now, it's like, okay, well, now we know each other, right? Now the leaders have met in person. We've, talked, we've done this and that.
You've known each other for a long time at this
for
point.
like 2-3 years probably for some of them. Some of them less, but people come in and out, right? But essentially, yeah, it's there to just really give us that chance to work together.
That's awesome. And like the goal of this org is to bring those Canadian collegiate experiences together, or is it
Yes.
like to bring all Canadian Overwatch players together?
So right now it's focused on collegiate particularly because we want to have kind of that starting ground stay the same for now. Definitely in the future, we're looking towards just general community stuff as well. But I think we realized after the rebuild that the scope was probably too big. And focusing on collegiate right now, our goal right now is to get the server ready for this sort of pickup game system where we'll have different schools host like maybe once a week or twice a week. So it'll be like, oh, University of Alberta is going to do every 2-3 Tuesdays, and Calgary's going to do every 2-3 Wednesdays, or we'll alternate. That way, it'll be easier for all of us to host these pickup games. These pickup games will be bigger because everybody will be like, hey, we should go over there and play over there this week, that sort of thing, and have a more kind of united outlook on that.
Yeah, and is it? And are these pickup games like tournaments? Or are they more just like, hey, if you want to play organized Overwatch, come here for Tuesday night, hosted by University of Calgary kind of
So it's more of the casual side. It's like, oh, hey, if you want to play the game with like 10 other people, come on in, type of deal, right? Like University of Calgary is doing it this week, so come by, type of thing. We don't take it too seriously. It's not like super serious. In terms of like serious events, we are working on getting our teams all in the server. So that would mean we can start like something like a scrim circuit essentially. So teams can practice against each other regularly. We can like have seating and stuff, and that'll give us a better idea of what I do with Esports Canada, which is Overwatch Power Rankings.
Oh yeah. Why don't we move on to that? So Esports Canada is also a fairly new organization.
Yes.
Set up by a lot of different folks all across Canada, whose goal is to bring up the different kind of esports in Canada, like from like in-person events to teams to players. How do you get involved into this really big organization? There's like VCs and PhDs like
it
all
is
over.
A very, very large organization. Currently, I work with Esports Canada Post-Secondary, which is like a branch off of the main organization, which focuses on collegiate. So what Esports Canada Post-Secondary does a lot of, their claim to fame, you could say, is first of all, they do a national tournament every year. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. So if you are playing with your college or you're interested in playing with your college, contact your esports teams if you're interested in playing. It should be near the end of November or mid-November. But
any specific game or
yeah, we have quite a few games. We have like Valorant, Rocket League, League of Legends, Overwatch, of course. Just your general esports staples, Call of Duty as well, where teams across Canada will compete to be essentially the best for that year.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's their main claim to fame for post-secondary. And on top of that, they also do weekly power rankings for the collegiate teams in Canada. They do it for Valorant, for League, for Rocket League, for Overwatch, etc. And so what had happened was they didn't have an Overwatch department for a while, and they were looking for somebody to lead the council. And so I submitted an application, and they accepted me. And so here we are.
Nice. Okay. Wow. Okay. So for those who haven't seen these, what Vectis does is he posts a graphic every week on the top 10 teams all across Canada that are the best at Overwatch.
Yes.
How do you figure out the power rankings for these? Are you watching games? Does somebody slip you some money under the table? Or how do you figure that out?
So my job as the power rankings chair is essentially to organize the team, right? So we have like people who've been, vetted. They've sent in applications of their own to join the team and be like, hey, I have this experience, I work with this team. I'm interested in ranking the teams, right? So what we'll do is we'll have the team every 2 weeks. It's a bi-weekly ranking. They will look over the results of the last 2 weeks, whether that's officials, scrims sometimes, depending on how reliable the scrim results are. Obviously, sometimes that goes up and down.
Yeah. But
depending on the leagues and general past performance, current performance, it's supposed to be a snapshot of that bi-weekly time, right? So obviously, if a team jumps 4 spots, they're not instantly the fourth for the rest of the year. They're fourth for the next 2 weeks based on the
Mm.
last 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so usually that's just an aggregate of the team's essentially rankings. Everyone submits a top 15. And then there's a process we do to just add it all up and then subtract for bias. There's a whole system for that
Right.
Esports Canada has already outlined.
Oh,
And
cool.
so every week I just work with the teams, like give them reminders, say, hey, you know, we got to do this. Go
Mhm.
on the league websites, collect the results, check in with teams that I know, you know, like, hey, how did you guys do this week? You know, I saw this is like a 3-1, right? How do you feel about that game? Did it go well?
Mm.
Those types of things is what we do mostly, and then just the basic aggregation of the score. And
Okay.
then we send it off to social media people and they handle
Oh,
the
and they make it look
graphics.
pretty? Okay.
Yes,
And it's not just for Overwatch, it's for Valorant and Rocket League and Call of
that's
Duty and all
correct.
that as well, eh?
My
CS:GO.
responsibility is to do Overwatch.
Yeah.
And so we have quite a big power ranking council for Valorant, I believe. And then obviously League of Legends, Rocket League, they're very reputable people as well.
Mhm.
So they're working hard on their end.
Okay, so like, what's the goal of posting these power rankings every 2 weeks? Is it just for the social media boost, or is it to like give a snapshot to potential scouts to say like, hey, keep an eye on UBC, for example, like they've been number 1 for 2 months or something?
I think it's definitely for. I think one of the goals that was outlined when this was started, at least when I joined, was that this program is meant to highlight schools for doing well in collegiate, right?
Okay.
Because the goal is to rank the top 10 Canadian teams, let's say, not necessarily in Canadian collegiate, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that means teams are playing against teams from other places as well, obviously places like the US, right? So our ranking is ranking only Canadian teams. I would suspect the reason for that is, once again, to recognize those schools and say, hey, your team's doing really well.
Mhm.
Let's recognize that. Let's say, hey, you know, this team's doing really well, guys. Look at how well they're doing
Yeah.
compared to the other Canadians, even though, you know, maybe a comparison to the US might be
Different.
more.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of
it would
teams,
be
yeah.
different, right?
Yeah. Okay, so like, oh, okay. So one thing you mentioned there was it's not just schools; it's also like independent teams, like Team Samson's
Yeah.
Gamers can also make the list.
The thing with independent teams is they technically can't make the list, but
Oh,
independent teams are considered at times. I know definitely for sure the Valorant Power Rankings Council counts teams that are not the school team sometimes, because sometimes the school team players will say, hey, for this tournament, I want to play with this team, right? And sometimes that'll be like an aggregate team. One example I can say is like 07 for Valorant. I don't know if you've heard of them.
not familiar, but yeah.
They've played in the Red Bull Campus Clutch qualifiers for Canada, the Canada qualifiers, to go to the LAN, I believe. I'm not sure where it is this year.
That's okay.
But yeah, they've qualified for the LAN, and essentially they have not qualified for the LAN this year, but they went to the qualifiers.
Yeah.
They are an aggregate team made out of SFU and U of Alberta players.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So SFU's team is still playing in that tournament at the same time. They're just playing with different members.
Okay.
Right. So sometimes these teams will be aggregates of other schools' players, and the council will look at it and be like, hey, these players are doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
So these players are from this school. So, I mean, they're not representing their team right now, but if they were, they'd still be really good. So maybe that might bump them up a spot if that team does really well proportionally.
Okay, so the power rankings aren't like an end all be all. It's more of like a guide or like a starting point for if people want to follow certain players or teams. That's like a good starting point for like following Canadian collegiate esports and highlighting these players, right?
Absolutely.
That's
It's
awesome.
definitely like a branching off point to be like, hey, these teams are really good right now. These teams have historically been playing well. If you want to follow a good team or you want to follow this team, this is how well they're doing.
That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of work, like tracking all these folks down all across Canada, different time zones and stuff, eh?
It's not too hard, actually, surprisingly,
okay,
because
yeah.
a lot of our results we look at directly from, like, you know, tournament sites, like things like NACE Star League or like NECC. So those are collegiate based tournament circuits, essentially, where you know, sometimes schools will pay money to join the league, and then it'll be like a regular season, let's say 12 weeks. They play 12 weeks of game straight, like once a week.
Wow.
You know, like
That's a
every
lot.
Tuesday they have one game, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll reschedule, right?
Yeah. I guess in the grand scheme of things, like
Yeah.
playing a sport is something similar. Like you play a season.
Yeah, you essentially play the season out, right? So we can just take results off of that. We can see the win-loss record. We can see their map wins. We can see what the matchups like. We can see matchups with other schools, right? You know, working with the team, the team also helps out, obviously, sort through that information, especially with scrims as well. It helps to know who's doing well this week, who's doing well with this composition, maybe sometimes. But that's usually reserved for, like, you know, if the top teams are like floundering or they're doing poor against this specific thing, that sort of thing.
Lots of data that's being tracked, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. So thanks for sharing so much about your job and your role outside of just being a student. Like that's a very fascinating job, and I'm sure like all those skills, even if it doesn't lead into esports directly, will lead into other opportunities, whether it's gaming or the government.
Hopefully.
Like they're all definitely super relevant skills in the day-to-day workplace. So that's awesome that you get to practice those and learn those through esports and through games. Real quick couple things about esports is,
Yes.
I guess, where do you see your esports journey in 5 to 10 years? Maybe the government blows up and you can't work there anymore.
Well, yeah.
Where do you want to see
Ooh, who
esports in
knows?
5 to 10 years for
Well,
yourself?
in 5 to 10 years for myself, I think right now my position with esports is really just like a community manager position, I'd say. It's a lot of work just to keep events running, keep things that are already existing running, or with the lounge to make something that exists better. In that sense, I've done the management stuff for quite a few years now with both SFU and UBC, just team wise. So I don't know if I'd be good as a team manager, but I think I have some of the requisite skills for that.
Totally.
Um, in terms of managing something like a facility, I'd definitely be down. I think working with esports organizations is a little tricky because right now we're kind of in not a good place.
A winter, the esports
in the esports winter, let's say,
Yeah.
a kind of a recession. And so I would definitely be hesitant to join any esports organization as like a staff member, just because it's not particularly stable right now.
Job security.
Yep.
Realistic. Yeah.
Job security. But in terms of joining stuff like for collegiate, I think collegiate is definitely stable right now. Collegiate, you know, like if you work for the school, you work for an organization that's essentially going to be there. Like even if, you know, even if those esports tournaments shut down, you know, that team is going to exist. Like they're not just going to shut the program down instantly.
Yeah.
And so
the school will still be there.
I'm definitely more open to working with large organizations like that aren't just working on esports. So like, I think even organizations like Shopify are very stable because they have a foot in the door for their primary business, but they're also investing in esports as a way to market their brand. I think that's definitely something that other esports orgs should look into, or other companies in general. I definitely think Shopify is an interesting example.
Okay. Do you mind sharing like quick thoughts on why it's interesting for Shopify? Like you mentioned that Shopify is a e-commerce brand.
That's correct. Yes.
But they also have a pretty successful and relatively long-running esports club and team in multiple esports. Are there any other examples of this in business?
I don't know off the top of my head if there are any other examples. I think the main comparison I'm making here between just kind of like the backing of esports orgs is if you look at organizations most recently, like let's say Koi, or let's say I'm trying to think of another one, Crew as well.
Crew, yeah.
Koi and Crew are both really based in their founders' reputations, essentially, because they're based on content creators' budgets. They're based on content creators making that organization, which is both. It's a very interesting gamble. I don't think it's bad because you build on that platform, but the second you lose that person, your org's in trouble, right? Obviously, the money might stop coming. The audience will definitely drop. But something like Shopify is interesting because they worked off of that e-commerce brand, and instead they pivoted a little and have a department now for esports where they run kind of definitely not a big ship. I don't think they run a major like operation, but it's definitely interesting to see how they're allocating their assets to kind of prioritizing the success of the team, but at the same time not expanding into the things like content, things like that a lot of esports orgs are now relying on. True, I think to develop their audience. Yeah, it's kind of like a reverse kind of thing where normally you try really hard to develop the audience, but Shopify is kind of going about it the other way. It's like, here's an esports team. Yeah,
and it's just for marketing their brand, right?
Just for marketing
Shopify
their brand.
Rebellion, Moist X Shopify. Yeah, that is a very interesting thing you point out. Like esports is like not just a game, it's like traditional sports. You need to find a way to make money. And from what people have experimented with like the Overwatch League, like us esports people aren't buying jerseys. Sorry.
Unfortunately, we are not buying jerseys.
Yeah.
Skins maybe, but
they're experimenting in ways to market to get money out of their audience. It's a business, and we respect that. We understand that. So it is interesting. Like that is one strategy. It's for Shopify. It's not a direct like.
It's not the source of income, right?
No, it's advertising.
Advertising essentially.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, business and esports, very interesting topic.
Yeah.
Definitely something to watch for since it's a very new and in its infant stage kind of business opportunity. Ups and downs. We are in an esports winter. Hopefully, it
Hopefully the
comes around
winter
soon.
comes around. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So that's a lot about esports already. We talked
Yeah.
quite a long time. Is there? Do you have any final thoughts about esports and your hopes for the future of it? Maybe.
My hopes for the future of esports. I think collegiate right now is in an interesting spot. I
Okay.
hope collegiate continues because supporting colleges in a way similar to like how traditional sports has been done is definitely a way forward for esports. The biggest problem I would say with like the esports winter is it's kind of like the repercussions of over investing. I think in the last 5 to 6 years,
100%. Yeah.
just both people pouring money into orgs. I mean, we saw how TSM went out with the FTX thing.
Yeah. Well, the Overwatch League experiment as a
Yeah,
whole. Yeah.
Overwatch League as a whole, and now you look at Valorant. The
Mm,
system works, but the pay is inflated, right? All the players are like, we expected this much money, but realistically down the line, I don't think that's going to be possible, right?
no.
So those numbers are dropping. It's a natural end of what they started, and so I think it's definitely possible for that to come back around.
Hmm.
So hopefully we come back into a more stable period of esports where the finances are better managed. It's a bit more realistic.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting you brought that up. It was felt very inflated when I hear some of these players were making like 100K.
Oh,
I get like everyone deserves to be paid for their passion, but there are people out there doing like charity work that don't make 100K.
yeah, definitely. There's
So
definitely
that's
some teams that overinvested in
yeah.
their whole running of the organization.
Yeah, and I do think esports is a very I don't know if important pillar is the right word. Maybe that's like
Mm.
overselling it. I'm very passionate about esports because I like watching like people play the game I like at an incredible level, and I love how they can get paid for it day to day. But yeah, it should be stable at a certain point. Like you should be able to make money off of it, but also not be overinvested in it. I don't know if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
100%.
So I want to quickly talk about you and how games have impacted your life.
Absolutely.
How have games impacted your life?
How have games impacted my life? Well,
Yeah,
I think from a young age, I was introduced to video games. My dad kind of liked playing video games when he was younger. He
cool.
doesn't do that as much anymore, really, at all.
He grew
Uh,
out of playing games.
I guess he claims he gets motion sick now, but I'm not. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not
okay,
too
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Maybe he does.
yeah.
Uh, well, either way, I think games have been a pretty formative part of my life. Just growing up, I played a lot of Nintendo DS. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I really have a special place in my heart for the DS and the 3DS.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nintendo consoles is something most people in my generation have grown up with. I think the rise of mobile gaming as a whole also introduced a lot of people to video gaming now. That's like
Yeah,
one of the big reasons why it's kind of blowing up now, I think.
it's the world's biggest install base, right?
Yeah,
Like everyone has a phone that can play games now.
everyone does.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. What's your favorite games growing up? Like we talked about
Yeah.
your three favorite of all time.
Yes.
Well, Metroid you kind of talked about growing up, but as a child, like if you were to ask Baby Vectis,
Yeah.
what would be his favorite game?
If I was to ask Baby Vectis, all right, Baby Vectis would probably say Pokemon games. I
Oh
actually really
yeah,
liked Pokemon games as a kid. I've grown out of it a little. I still like them, but I just don't have the time to go through a full run
I can
anymore.
feel that. I feel that.
Um, what else in terms of games? Oh, I loved Minecraft. Minecraft was really big.
Oh.
I was part of that generation that Minecraft was like
Mhm.
really big, and it was definitely interesting because it's like the first introduction to multiplayer games, right? Like a true online multiplayer game
Yeah.
where you're like collaborating with people or fighting other people, etc.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's so funny you call Minecraft your childhood game. That came out at the end of my adolescence. But yeah, Minecraft is a really special one for sure. Lots of people have brought that up. I totally get why it works because I also enjoy it. It's
Yeah,
it's very accessible. No, that's awesome. So Minecraft and Pokemon, two core classics.
definitely. Yeah.
What game would you say had the biggest influence on you? Not just in your like prospective career or your career skills, but
Yeah.
as a person. What game would you say had the biggest influence?
Is the biggest influence on me. It's probably Overwatch, to be honest, because I think Overwatch came out right at that time where I stopped playing Minecraft and I wasn't really playing anything else. And so Overwatch was one of those games I looked to and I was like, oh, it's like really team based, right? I think that taught me a lot about how I like. I mean, I think even before Overwatch came out, I was a very a very like teamwork oriented person. But I think Overwatch really showed me like, oh, okay, this is like one big part of how you interact with other people, right? This is like a major part of how you can make things better.
Mm.
And I think the nature of Overwatch in general is very collaborative, both outside, like inside and outside of the game. And so that really helped me grow that part of myself.
Okay. Inside of the game, I understand.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with Overwatch, it is a team game, but the way it's set up and the way it's designed is like one person can't do everything all at once if
Yeah,
you want to
you
win,
can't.
right? So stuff like timing your attacks together, timing your abilities together, that takes like countdowns
A
and
lot of
sync, right?
coordinations, yeah.
But you also mentioned outside the game. How has Overwatch helped you outside?
Outside of the game, I think that goes back to, my esports stuff now and the early esports stuff. I watched a lot of the Overwatch League, and that was one of the big things where I was like, oh, people really can go pro in
Mm.
video games. And I think it gave me a good look into why people play video games going into adulthood, right? Why people continue doing that. Like you said before, it's definitely a way for people to be like less stressed, to relieve stress,
Hmm.
just that kind of escapism. And definitely the collaborative nature, like I said, like especially I think being in Canada was actually a big part of that. If I was in the US, I actually think it might have been a bit different
Okay.
because in Canada, like even prior to Overwatch Canadian leagues, people knew each other, but not really. Like unless you were like a pro or like playing in contenders, let's say, if you were like, unless you were like in those high ranks looking to actually become a pro or get really good at the game, there's no reason you have to talk to another person, right?
Hmm.
About Overwatch specifically.
Okay. Okay.
And so I think it was really interesting how Overwatch really brought us all together and we said, hey, wait a minute. Well, why don't we just talk to each other? We can do that now, right? Like in the past, it's not possible, right?
Yeah.
Because we're so far away.
Hmm.
But now we have Discord, we have things like Discord, Skype, all these sorts of messaging channels, all these ways to work together. It's like, why shouldn't we just work together?
Okay.
It's
And
like,
and you were only
yeah,
brought together because of your love for Overwatch
absolutely.
specifically, and like the game because it is like very team oriented.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that was kind of the first step to even think about like what you said. Why don't we come together? Why don't we meet
absolutely.
other people? That's awesome. That's a really great insight, and thank you for sharing that. So as we close out the episode, I like to ask two very fun questions for my guests. Um, yeah, let's start with fun question number one. So let's say Grow Up Level Up, this
Yes.
lovely podcast here, expands to a million bajillion subscribers, and I'm very successful, and
Wow.
I would like to fund your dream project. It could
Wow.
be a video game, it could be like an esports org, or I was gonna say government agency, but I don't think I have enough money for that. But what kind of project would it be?
I think right now I'm really focused on accessibility.
Oh.
That's one of the big reasons why I decided to become VP facilities at SFU Esports is because when I was growing up, I didn't have too many opportunities. Like even when Overwatch came out, I was like, I don't have a PC, I can't play this game. Best I can do is watch the
Mm.
Overwatch League, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
I think I have a good understanding of some of the things that limit people from playing games nowadays, whether that's like time, inability to access a device, right? Just general budget, those sorts of things. And so one of the big reasons I opened the lounge and helped on that a lot and I'm passionate about is because I want people to be able to access these things, right? Especially people like first year students who are like probably away from home. They probably don't have their PC,
Yeah, or don't have too many friends, right?
don't have too many friends.
Yeah.
Like there's 100 different reasons why you could come to that lounge, right? And so I definitely think any project relating to accessibility is definitely in my ballpark.
Yeah.
Event hosting as well, for sure, but accessibility is definitely up there for me, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, event hosting, I feel like, is part of that accessibility. It's giving
yeah,
people opportunities to come together. That's awesome. I never heard of that one before, and that's totally true. Like,
yeah,
gaming, we mentioned super accessible now with phones, but
yeah.
specific types like PC gaming or even like playing a PS5 or Xbox, that is really expensive for a lot of folks in the
It's
world.
expensive.
And yeah, like kids and people who come from maybe lower socioeconomical homes that
Yes.
don't have this opportunity, they don't get to meet these people and unlock um, these types of events
Yeah,
and skills and opportunities. So that's awesome. Cool. That's a great one. So a billion bajillion dollars.
a
So
bajillion
we're
dollars.
buying 4090 Ti's for
Yeah,
everybody,
yeah,
360 hertz monitors, RGB, that kind of stuff.
yeah. That kind of thing. I also think just like having that space, like what we have at SFU, let's say, I think making that space like very accessible, like I said, just in terms of like not requiring membership fees, opening that up, having events where people can work together on that. I think that's really important, right? I also think things like scholarships are important to encourage
Mm.
people,
Mhm.
to both study and, work on other skills, like let's say esports. We have esports scholarships, in different places in the US. I mean, we're definitely limited on that here in Canada.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
some places have them, most places don't.
Mhm.
And so things like that, I definitely like for that to be definitely more invested in.
Yeah, yeah, and by scholarships, we literally mean the comparison where you get paid to go to school, but also you
Yes.
got to play for this esports team or
It's yeah,
or
it's
something.
it's
Yeah.
it's parallel to that idea of getting a scholarship to play football, let's say,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Whether that's the probably not your whole university career. They're not going to pay the whole thing off, but like
Hmm.
maybe every semester $1,000, $2,000, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's giving opportunities for those who need it.
Exactly.
Same idea. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing your dream project. One more question for you as we close out this show. What is your one piece of wisdom to leave with the world?
My one piece of wisdom. Uh, I think if you have a passion, especially in esports, don't don't wait. I think that's one big thing. People are really hesitant to be like, "Oh, can I really do this? Can I do this?" Esports is one of those fields that is developing so quickly that it's probably scary to most people to be like, "Oh, like it looks scary. I don't want to get involved in that right now."
Hmm.
But if anything, I think it's definitely one of the most moldable places for you to be, right? Like for myself, I just watched the Overwatch League when I joined, right? Like I just followed the pro scene. I didn't even play the game well. Like I still don't play the game well. I suck at I
Oh
suck at
yeah,
Overwatch,
yeah.
right? But my thing was like, hey, I like pros, right? Like, and having a team would be really cool. And so I started something with SFU, right? I started that team back up when Overwatch 2 came up, but I'd
Mm,
pre-planned it before, right? So I think taking that step is really important. That's one of the reasons I do what I do now, is because I recognize that, hey, I think a lot of these people probably have great ideas.
mhm.
So I'm going to do my best to enable them to make those ideas come true,
Of
at
course.
least in some capacity, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I would just suggest you guys to just don't hesitate to take that first step, take initiative, and try what you want to try. Definitely don't put your life savings on it, but put some time
Don't
into it.
inflate those wages.
Yep, put some time into it. Try what you want to try. Start an initiative that you think might not work even, but give it a shot. It's definitely worth it to try it out.
Totally. Yeah, I really like that. And one thing I forgot to ask you earlier is if someone wants to get involved with you or
Yes.
with UBCEA or SFUEA or there are so many acronyms today. Overwatch Canada League, Esports Canada. How can
Yes.
people get involved with stuff like that?
How could people get involved with stuff like that? I think it goes along the same lines as what I was saying before. It's actually really simple. If you ask any like esports club leader or like esports club hiring department, even esports Canada and stuff, if you ask them, hey, how can I be a part of this? How can I sign up? They'll just send you an application form. You
Hmm.
might have to wait a couple months or like up to a year just to, for the cycle to roll around, because it's at the end of the day, it's professional. You have to have scheduling,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But 90% of places would be like, at least give you like they definitely give you a response, right? They'd be like, hey, submit an application here, right?
Yeah.
The rest is up to you, right? You submitting your application, being capable of doing those things, working on specific skills that they need. That's 100% up to you. But most places are always in search of helping hands in
Mm,
some way or another. So if that's what you want, you should go for it.
that's awesome. I think yeah, like Canada, the land is so big, but we're a small, well, not small country. We're a relatively
Yeah,
small country and even smaller niches such as esports. The top is not as far as you think.
it's
So
not as far as
reaching
you
out,
think.
yeah, so reaching out to these leaders such as Jaden Vectis and Esports Canada, Overwatch
Yes.
Canada League, all of that is not as far as you think. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing
No, thanks
all
for
that.
having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, audience, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Grow Up, Level Up. Leave a comment what you thought about this episode, about what our conversation is, and what you think of the show
Yeah.
overall. Like I said earlier, we are taking a break for the winter time as we hunker down for the holidays. It doesn't snow in this part of Vancouver, but
Hopefully
it
not.
might, it might. And then I'm gonna lay back with some hot
Yeah.
cocoa. please check out some of our other shows, You Grow Up Level Up or You Gulu. You can find that at our YouTube and on the same podcast feed you're watching as well. Or check out Cheers Love, an Overwatch League retrospective podcast for the fans. That is exclusively on YouTube. I shouted this out earlier, but I did an episode with That 30 Show with David and G. You can find that on YouTube or on podcasts at That 30 Show, where I talk a little bit about what play means to us adults and share a little bit about the behind the scenes on this podcast as well. Stay tuned and follow me on all the socials at SamsonXP and at Grow Up Level Up. Vectis, where can people find you?
You can find me on Discord, Vectis, period, and as well as on Twitter, Vectis Overwatch, OW.
Vectis OW. And we'll have that linked in the show notes below.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Vectis, it's been awesome. Thanks for coming all this way for this show.
It's been an honor.
Yeah, no problem. And for everyone else, we'll catch you next time.
Peace.